All right, welcome back to Sunrise. They were joined this morning by His Excellency, he's the Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tuga, joins us this morning virtually. Good morning and Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for coming on the program today.
Morning, Chamberlain. Merry Christmas to you.
Okay, I think we're going to have to turn off my audience a little lower than yours. So, I'm hoping that they'll just help me just turn it up a little bit. Honorable Minister, we have seen the comments from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but of course, Nigerians woke up to that information that some strikes have been carried out by the United States. But we also did see comments saying it was in cooperation, collaboration, and permission of Nigeria. So could you, maybe as you give us the background, could you tell us what is the nature of Nigeria's involvement or cooperation in this matter? Could you unmute? I think you're muted.
Sorry, I think you unmuted me inadvertently. So Nigeria has remained consistent in its approach, which is, like the statement says, to work with all partners that are committed to the fight against terrorism, irrespective of what religion, who the victims are, whether they are Muslims or Christians, and irrespective of what type of terrorism, be it terrorism being carried out in the name of one religion or the other, or indeed even banditry. So this is an ongoing process. We have been working closely with the Americans. This is what we've always been hoping for, to work with the Americans, work with other countries to combat the terrorism, to stop the death of innocent Nigerians. So this is a vindication of the Tinubu administration. For those who thought that there was some foot dragging, or the government wasn't doing enough, it is a clear indication that we are committed and we are prepared to work with all comers.
Okay, so we understand that there was some reconnaissance done before the strikes. Were we also involved in that, and how so?
It's Nigeria that provided the intelligence. I was on the phone yesterday for 19 minutes with Secretary of State Marco Rubio of the United States. We spoke extensively, and we agreed that I was going to speak with President Tinubu, for President Tinubu to give the go-ahead. And I did speak with him, and it was agreed also that the statements that would follow would be statements that would show clearly that it is a strike against terrorism and that it is part of the ongoing joint operations between Nigeria and collaboration between Nigeria and the United States, and that it is not to do with religion, it's to do with protecting Nigerians and innocent lives of either Nigerians or non-Nigerians. This was clear. We spoke twice. We spoke for 19 minutes before the strike, and then we spoke again for another 5 minutes before it went on.
Okay, I know you said we provided intelligence, but we saw some articles that said that, is it Africom also were flying from Ghana over Nigeria for some recce or recon assignments. So was our Air Force involved, or that didn't happen? What can you tell us about that?
It is a collaborative effort. Let's not get bogged down on the operational details, and I would certainly not want to give away too much that could jeopardize any future actions by Nigeria. So let us keep the discussion to diplomacy, which is my own area, and to foreign policy. With regards to operational details, I think you're going to have to engage with the security agencies or the military.
Honorable Minister, many people have been looking at this particular strike since it happened, and some divided really on two basic thought processes. On one side, we have people who are saying, oh wait, was our sovereignty as a country infiltrated? I would like you to speak to that. And then for the others who are describing this strike as the best Christmas gift ever given to the Nigerian people, considering that our brothers, our Muslim brothers, were killed in the mosque in Borno State as well, which also brought up the conversation about how this terrorism doesn't care what your surname is or what your religion is. It's killing Christians and killing Muslims as well. Could you speak to both issues? One, the issue of our sovereignty, so that people can understand what has happened. And then secondly, to talk about how this is an ongoing situation to help quell the terrorism that we're facing in this country.
You can be rest assured that President Tinubu and his administration would not agree to, acquiesce to, or take any actions that would violate the sovereignty or territorial integrity of Nigeria. It's a collaborative effort. It is what we have been calling for when we even allude to the Leahy laws that stopped the sale of military equipment, both kinetic and non-kinetic, to Nigeria, which in part has affected the ability of Nigeria to respond to some of these threats, both domestically as well as within the region. So now that the U.S. is cooperating with us, we will do it jointly, and we will ensure, just as the president emphasized yesterday before he gave the go-ahead, that it must be made clear, even the framing of what comes after it must be made clear that it is a joint operation and it is not targeting any religion, nor is it simply in the name of one religion or the other. We are a multi-religious country, and we are working with partners like the U.S. To fight terrorism and safeguard the lives and property of Nigerians.
Honorable Minister, some people would want to find out, is this an ongoing operation? Are we going to be seeing more strikes like this one?
Well, I believe, like I said, it's an ongoing thing, and we're working with the U.S., we're working with other countries as well. So for all those that are prepared to work with us to combat terrorism, to ensure security in our region, in Nigeria itself, we're ready to cooperate. We're ready to collaborate. So this is something, that has remained the same. Put it this way, you can call it a new phase of an old conflict. For us, it's something that's been ongoing. So we focus on that.
There was something you mentioned in the course of our conversation. You talked about the Leahy laws, and many people need to understand, the dynamics of that and how, we're working better with the American government. Just so you can break it down, some people know what that is, but just so we can understand what the Leahy laws were, how it stopped our capability to handle terrorism attacks, and how those Leahy laws lifted now, what's responsible for the better cooperation that we're having with the American government, as opposed to when we were being told that the Leahy laws weren't going to allow them to give us the weapons that we needed to combat terrorism.
So the United States Congress passed a law that stopped the sale of military equipment, whether it's guns or even blankets for soldiers, let's say, it doesn't matter whether it's a weapon or just anything that would be used by the military. It stopped it from being sold to Nigeria on the premise, on the accusation that the Nigerian military was violating had carried out human rights abuse. Now, this, of course, is totally incorrect, because in every military, there will be someone doing something that is not right. It exists in every country, but to use a particular case or an isolated case to paint an entire military, we felt, was not right, and it smacked of double standards, because there were certainly countries that were whose military were doing far worse, that were being sold military equipment. So we're happy to see that the U.S. Government under President Trump has revisited this issue and is selling military equipment and both kinetic and non-kinetic to countries like Nigeria. And you have to also bear in mind, in fairness to President Trump, it was Trump that agreed during the Buhari administration to sell aircraft, military aircraft, Super Tucanos, to Nigeria. So in terms of his willingness to work with Nigeria in terms of combating terrorism and insecurity, he has fared better than others.
So does that mean that, yes, we can purchase equipment from the U.S. and they will sell to us?
Well, yes, I believe so. It's part of the cooperation as well. But, again, there are other considerations that they make, and there's also the considerations we have to take in terms of our pockets. So how much are we willing to spend on equipment? So it's something that it has to do with financial considerations as well. And it's unfortunate that we've gotten to this, because if that Leahy law had not been applied, if previous administrations had not gone into Libya, broken up Libya. Remember when Gaddafi was killed? So that led to further insecurity in our region that, is affecting us today, because it meant that fighters from Libya were coming all the way down into the Sahel and into Nigeria. And also meant that weapons that were amassed by the Gaddafi regime also found their way further south. So if you go back to a couple of decades ago, when Nigeria was leading ECOMOG to resettle Liberia, to resettle Sierra Leone, the Leahy law was not in place at the time, which is what made us more effective. So there's cause and effect, and it's what we have always been, drawing attention to. And this conflict is a regional conflict. It's not a Nigerian conflict. If you frame it incorrectly and say that it's a Nigerian conflict or that it's a religious conflict within Nigeria, you get it wrong, and then you apply the wrong solutions to the problem. So that's why the framing is equally important.
Okay, so speaking about that, are we in conversation with our neighbors in order to, so that they don't misunderstand what's going on here, and what level of conversation are we having with them, if at all we are?
Well, that's a rhetorical question. I'm sure you saw my pictures with...
yeah, we're going to come to that.
Burkina
Faso, right? Yeah.
So we're always talking to them. We make it clear, and they also agree that we must unite in the fight against terrorism. It affects them actually more than it even affects us, because they are facing a bigger threat in the Sahel, because these are Sahelian countries. And of course, Nigeria is also part of the multinational joint task force with Niger, with Chad, with Cameroon, and with to our west with the Republic of Benin. So it's something. Of course, Niger sort of withdrew from participation in the multinational joint task force. I went to Niger, you would recall, and it's part of the efforts that we've been making to have them become more involved in the multinational joint task force. Unfortunately, they decided to become less involved after the military coup that took place there. And what caused the military coup there? Failure in strategy in the Sahel, because it focused more on curbing migration to Europe, which meant that there was an attempt to work with Azawad Tuareg groups in countries like Niger, like Mali, to control border areas so that migrants would not be going further north in a region that relies heavily on seasonal migration because it's a dry, it's an arid region. So when you have separatist groups like the Azawad, like the Tuareg groups that want to create their own country, collaborating with foreigners, with outsiders, it's going to upset the military. And the military will not just sit by because the military are trained to keep countries together. This is it. This is what we're talking about here now. We're talking about territorial integrity. So you can imagine how it would have incensed the military in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, which led to some of these military coups, and it led to Niger ceasing to participate in the multinational joint task force, and which further affected our fight against terrorism, our fight against Boko Haram. You can see how all these things are interconnected. So when you try to reduce it to just say, oh no, it's Muslims killing Christians in Nigeria, you see how you can get it completely wrong. It's a regional conflict. Lake Chad and Sahel, which is affecting us.
You know, that there were those who were a bit surprised. They thought that a lot of some of this activity, or they are predominantly domiciled in the northeast, some of these activities, and then this strike in the northwestern part of the country, Jabo district in, I understand, Tambuwal local government area in Sokoto State. Many were a bit surprised, thinking, oh dear, it might have even been in our backyard, because we never even heard of any strike or any commentary, if I remember properly, from our security agencies. Does that then tell us that, well, maybe they need to pass on more information to us so that we can be a lot more aware of what is going on in this country?
No, but everybody is aware, Chamberlain. Come on. Even
that
you
is
are aware.
in Jabo local government area? That have a base there?
No, you're aware that the conflict and the fight against terrorism is not just in the northeast, it's not just Boko Haram. It is also affecting Mali. Mali is to the west, northwest of Nigeria. So when we talk about ISWAP, Islamic State in West Africa province, when we talk about JNIM, these are groups that are operating to the northwest of Nigeria because they're operating in Mali and places like that. That's how we also ended up with some of these other groups like Mahmouda and Lakurawa. This is all happening in the northwestern part of Nigeria. So it is Sokoto, it is Zamfara, it is Kebbi, it is Katsina, and some of it is cascading down to Niger. I'm sure you're old enough to remember that Sokoto, Kebbi, Zamfara, and even Niger used to be referred to as the northwestern state. So it is the west, northwest of Nigeria, but that is what is cascading down into Nigeria, into the Middle Belt, and when it hits places like Benue that are predominantly Christian, it is misconstrued as an attack against Christians. No. Muslims have been killed for quite some time now in these states, in Katsina, in Zamfara, in Sokoto, in Kebbi, in Niger even.
I mean, Honorable Minister, it has been a very terrible situation, and anyone who's who understands this country would understand that this is not something that has to do with one person attacking another. No, this is we have a common enemy, so to speak, especially looking at everything that's going on. I want to, of course, with the strike from the United States, the criticism is coming. It's trickling in, and I think it's going to get even more. But I'm going to get you to talk about a few of those criticisms that we're hearing right now. One of them is saying that, look, let's be careful not to turn our country into a theater of war, because the altruistic nature of the United States is being called to question here. Do they really love us that much that they just want to help, or is there something else at play here? So there are questions about, you know, not allowing our country to become a theater of war. Could you help us speak to that? And then another question people are having online right now is about how the strikes were done. Were civilians protected in this particular airstrike? Is that a conversation that is being had? We do know that many terrorists go into, in Nigeria at least, go into communities and use the members of the communities as human shields. Was that something that was discussed in the wake of this, or before the airstrike happened? Just so you can give us some perspective on these two areas.
Okay, so that's why, you know, it's important for it to be a collaborative effort, because it's our country. We know it better than everybody else, and you know, it's working with what it's bringing together what we know with superior technology, basically. So this is why it has to be collaborative. Otherwise, you know, it would not work, and that's why we were comfortable with the idea of a strike against terrorists, and it is something that was carefully studied, and it was jointly worked on and decided. Like I said, you know, I spoke to Secretary Rubio yesterday twice. First time for 19 minutes, second time for 5 minutes. After that, and in between, I spoke with President Tinubu before he finally acquiesced to it. He gave the go-ahead. And of course, our security agencies have equally, and military, have been working with the Americans. So it's important that we understand that. And that precision can only work if the two sides work together. So we don't have a problem with that. And for us, it shows that, you know, the government is committed to the fight against terrorism. It's a priority, and we are prepared to take action wherever necessary to ensure that we stamp out terrorism that is threatening the lives of our citizenry.
I think part of what is also embedded in Kayla's question is, what is in it for America? Are they doing this altruistically? What do we promise them?
Well, let's not pour over, you know, forensically over, you know, what has been said and, you know, what is going on in the domestic politics of the two countries. There's something referred to as deontology and consequentialism. You know, does the end justify the means, or the other way around? So for us, this issue of insecurity and terrorism is of utmost importance, such that sometimes the end justifies the means. So, you know, others can interpret it a different way. Our own priority is protecting Nigerians and ensuring that we stamp out terrorism in our country that is affecting our citizens. That's number one priority. And so long as those actions do not violate international law, do not violate our sovereignty, and conform with the provisions of our Constitution. And within our Constitution, we have 5 foreign policy objectives. One of them is conforming to international law. and treaties that we've signed and agreements, which includes the Geneva Convention, laws that guide the conduct of war or use of military force. None of that is violated. So this is something that was considered perspicaciously. So we don't have a problem with that.
Okay, so whatever we promised them, which we did, is secondary. So the primary thing is to make sure there's safety here. That's what you're saying.
That's it, but it's not. There's no. I personally, don't know of any promise that was made.
Or is that the diplomats in you speaking?
Terrorism. We have collaborated with them to fight terrorism. So it's not a matter of promising anything, and there's no promise that is going to touch on our sovereignty and territorial integrity. No.
Okay, so clearly there are rules of engagement, but we're winding down, so I might not dwell on that. But could you tell us, I mean, you also heard the narrative, bombs don't end this kind of thing. So what about us following the money, the weapons routes, the political cover? Did all of that conversation come through when you spoke with Secretary Rubio?
Well, I can tell you that this is something that we've been working on for a very long time, not just with the Americans, but with others. In almost all our foreign engagements with countries that have any influence over the flow. I'm sure you must have been hearing about the illicit
financial
flow. Financial flow. This is something that has been going on. We discuss it in ECOWAS, we discuss it in the African Union, we discuss it bilaterally with countries such as the United Kingdom, because London is a financial hub. We discuss it with the U.S. because, the dollar is still the international currency or legal tender, if you will, and with China, with everybody at the BRICS. So it's clearly something, it's a no-brainer. This is something that we always discuss. And don't forget that we also have the non-kinetic approach to the fight against terrorism, which has been very effective. We have a safe corridor, prior to Niger opting out of this multinational joint task force because of the failure of this strategy in the Sahel to stop migration that brought about the coup. We were actually, one of our challenges was how to contain the number of people that were pouring in, surrendering, particularly Boko Haram. But then this change, you saw an upsurge in Boko Haram activities, just like we witnessed this suicide bombing recently. We had, it had become a thing of the past. We're doing so well, which is why it is important for those that are concerned about terrorism to collaborate with countries like Nigeria, and in particular Nigeria, because Nigeria is a leader in the region. And that's how we can be effective. So we have to be sincere. And we are sincere. Nigeria is sincere about its purpose and about its objectives.
Okay, just one more thing. That trip you made to Burkina Faso, there were narratives that the aircraft was heading to Portugal for training. But after your visit, the aircraft came back to the country. Were they going to Portugal? What can you tell us about that?
No. The aircraft never went back to, it never came back to Nigeria. Aircraft, as we speak, is leaving Morocco, or would have left Morocco for Portugal. So you see, because it's a C-130, it can't fly directly, and it has problems also. So it developed a problem. It landed in Burkina Faso, to the west of Burkina Faso, and then from there it flew to Ghana, and from Ghana it flew to Guinea. From Guinea, it went to Morocco, and from Morocco, now it's on its way to Portugal. I'm not sure. As we speak, it might have even arrived in Portugal. And what it had were pilots and engineers, so that if there's any problem, they could fix it and continue with their journey. So it never came back to Nigeria. It still needs to be fixed because it is also part of the equipment that we need, which is why we were talking about Leahy law stopping us from having access to military equipment and so forth. So we need that C-130 up and running and working effectively. Which is
are we going to phase it out if it can't go that far or that consistent?
Phase what out?
The C-130, yeah.
Well, it still seems to be in good condition and working. It just needs to be serviced.
Okay. All right, Your Excellency, Yusuf Tuga, Minister of Foreign Affairs, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back in just a moment. We've still got some ground to cover here today on Sunrise Daily, so stay on with us.